of their experiences with their relationships with others. And if we're on a exhausted, empty grind, then and nobody has anything in their cups to give to others, then we are all kind of in trouble, really. And you can go faster and faster and maybe get paid a little bit more money for it, but you're still screwed. I think that's why people are using the word crisis.
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell, I think.
No, I do agree. It's a question of wonderful responses. Paddy says, well, as drum major of the New Zealand Army Band, I naturally wake at 2 a.m. and stare at the ceiling working out marching displays. Isn't that wonderful?
That is. You're living your passion.
Yeah, living the passion, going through his hand, staring at the ceiling. Here's one here. Thanks for your support for teachers. I'm a specialist, or I can't remember, Carla was supporting, or all of us were really, weren't we? I'm a specialist secondary teacher in my 18th year. Previously was a legal executive for 17 years. It is by far a harder job, and the workload gets bigger with each year. The students keep me going back each day. And another one here, I deal daily with 311 to 13-year-olds, many of whom fight, swear at peers and teachers, throw furniture, stop teachers teaching, stop kids learning, who suffer from anxiety and depression. I could go on and on and on, but you kind of get the idea.
Yeah.
On a final note, a cinema has opened in Switzerland that offers customers the option of watching the movie in a double bed instead of a traditional seat. Now, it's called a VIP bedroom, and it's an attempt to lure movie viewers back from home streaming services such as Netflix. Now, a spot in one of the beds, which feature electronically adjustable headrests, costs 73 New Zealand dollars and includes free food and drink. So, Jock Anderson, would the thought of going to a double bed in the middle of the Timaru CBD and watching, I don't know, the Terminator or Star Wars, lying down, dressing gown on, entice you?
Well, two things there. I don't currently possess a dressing gown.
Oh, no, that's getting frightening.
I can think... Oh, who said that? I can probably think of better uses of probably a double bed and or a movie screen. It sounds to me like a bit of a gimmick, actually.
Yeah.
Although I can think of a few films that might work with a double bed. I'm thinking, in fact, this one went through my head the other day. You'll remember before your time, Wallace, the Ken Russell film Women in Love, which I think was made in 1969. D.H. Lawrence, one of his finest books, a relationship, and it featured a lot of naked wrestling between two blokes, Alan Bates and Oliver Reed, and got
All
Brenda
right, Jock,
Jackson
let's
got
probably stop you there. We know where you're
Stop you
going.
there, okay, that's too much information.
That's
That's okay, right?
It was alongside you not having a dressing gown. I think it was totally
That's
to your
enough?
life.
Okay,
Yep,
right.
Look,
enough.
great story, Jock. What about you?
I'm Tongan and we don't do PDA, public displays of affection. I would feel possibly quite differently if my son wanted to take his girlfriend to a movie that involved a bed. I don't know. It's just crossing a line.
Well, I'm not assuming it's anything other than to relax. You can
Of course, yes.
It's deep reclining, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
But
Deep reclining.
Yeah.
That will be my word of the day.
That's a new word you've heard here on the panel. Look, I thank you very much to both of you for being on the panel this afternoon, Carla Miller and Jock. It's been wonderful, and we've had a huge response, particularly around bullying and a lot around teachers. I hope that one day I can get to read some more of those wonderful responses from you all. So thank you for listening. Carla and Jock, thanks for being with me today. Checkpoint next.
Koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, no more playing nice in the sandbox as teachers prepare to walk. Minister Tracy Martin says there's no crisis in education and she doesn't know who's responsible for teachers' unrealistic pay expectations. Meanwhile, the government's announced an overhaul of NCEA after some students pass despite poor reading and math skills, and exams are making a comeback. The UN Secretary-General sounds the doomsday alarm over climate change, and will Auckland Council get on board with free public transport for under 15s on weekends? And an inside look at how an essential oil company courted an Auckland primary school. Does it pass the sniff test?
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leata tēnei. The government is overhauling the NCEA qualification, so students will have to sit more exams and do less internal assessment. The government says it will reduce the pressure on both students and teachers. The Associate Education Minister Tracy Martin says many teenagers are suffering from stress and the amount of internal assessment for NCEA is partly to blame.
This constant assessment, this constant drive to get more and more and more credits. For our secondary school students, they have told us that is just adding to their stress level. So if we can take it away and make it simpler and easier for them to achieve and be successful, then let's do that.
Tracy Martin says the changes will also stop students from choosing easy standards or attempting far more standards than they need to. The acting Prime Minister is blaming the sale of the iconic Tip Top brand on Fonterra's financial management. The New Zealand Dairy Cooperative bought the business in 2001 but has said it didn't want to spend to invest in modernising the business as it looks to cut its debt and get back to basics. The buyer, Fonterra, is the third largest ice cream manufacturer in the world. Winston Peters says the sale is bad for New Zealand and the economy.
The circumstances of Fonterra's management, under which some people got paid multi-million dollars as salaries, has led to now an added value company, an operation like that, going now onto offshore ownership. How are we ever going to make it if, unlike other countries that see the need to take their primary base products into serious added value?
Winston Peters, the acting Prime Minister. A witness to the Linwood Mosque shooting says the $12,000 victim support will pay him this week will make a big difference. As well as paying out extra money to the families of people who died and to those injured, the organisation is for the first time providing funds to the 283 people who witnessed the attacks. Shoaib Ghani says the money will go towards reducing his $40,000 student loan. He says it took him more than a month before he was able to return to the mosque for prayers, but he now goes every night.
I still struggle with sleeps, but it's much better than before. Just came back from India, saw my family, and people are here helping. Beautiful people, nice people, talking well. And the mosque is also, very helpful. It's a month of Ramadan, so I go every day in the mosque to, open my fast, break my fast. So it's pretty good. I'm getting better.
Mosque shooting survivor Shoaib Ghani. The UN Secretary-General has issued a monumental challenge to the youth of New Zealand: defeat climate change and ensure technology is used as a force only for good. Antonio Guterres was speaking to students at the Auckland University of Technology in Manukau today, part of his 3-day trip to New Zealand. Matthew Tunison was there.
Antonio Guterres expressed his concern about the speed at which the internet and other technologies are advancing, saying it's too fast for the world's lawmakers to keep up. He says it's up to young people to establish the rules and principles to ensure new technology is a force for good, not a danger for humankind. The UN Secretary-General also expressed his disappointment at government's efforts in tackling climate change, saying they're still subsidising fossil fuels by trillions of dollars every year. On this too, Mr Guterres says his hope lies with the youth of the world. This is Matthew Tunison.
Primary school teachers and principals are considering the possibility of further industrial action if the mega strike in 2 weeks' time doesn't shift the government's pay offer. 50,000 teachers plan to strike on May the 29th. Fielding Intermediate Principal Diane Crate says teachers are struggling and the chatter in her staff room shows they are prepared to take further action.
I'm hearing lots of teachers talking about what action could be next. Could that be 2-3-day strikes? Could that be indefinite strike action? Could that be... There's a whole range of things being talked about. I'm certainly not hearing teachers saying, oh, well, we might just have to give in.
Diane Crate says in the past she would get plenty of applications for teaching roles, but now she often has to re-advertise the jobs. The families of 4 people killed in a crash in Waverley last year are joining forces with a family petitioning for roadside drug testing. An inquest heard on Friday that the driver in the crash that left 7 people dead was high on synthetic cannabis. Karen Dow, whose son was killed by a driver high on meth and cannabis in 2017, has extended her petition for random roadside saliva testing by a week to gather more signatures. Murray Keen's mother, aunt and uncle died in the Waverley crash.
We just hope that everybody in New Zealand who feel passionate about this roadside testing should go online and put their names down, because it is very important. It's been said before, the numbers show there's more people dying on our roads from drugs than drinking.
Murray Keane, who lost 3 family members in a crash. The Auckland Council is to consider making public transport free for children under 15 during weekends and public holidays. The proposal has been discussed informally by councillors and Auckland Transport, but would have to be approved by the full council as part of its budget process. The Mayor Phil Goff hopes the plan will allow more families to get around the city during the weekends when there is normally a lot of space on buses and trains. That's the news.
A mega strike?
It's really hard to see how it could be resolved, but the government's not blinking.
But where's the money?
It's a situation where they talked a big game, and their so-called year of delivery, they're delivering jack.
And a new road for Wellington?
No, that's not what I said, but you can run with that in the meantime.
Hit the ground running. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Corin Dan, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, how the lid was blown on the US college admissions scandal. And after 10, US comedian Josh Wolfe on honing his skill as a funny man and as a father. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Manawatu, including Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Cloudy periods, isolated showers clearing this evening, but returning to western areas later tomorrow. For Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairirapa, showers gradually clearing today, fine tomorrow. Horowhenua, Kapiti and Wellington, mainly fine, but a few showers late tomorrow. For Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine today, rain developing about the western ranges tomorrow, and a few showers spreading elsewhere late in the day. For Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, fine today, apart from the odd shower. Rain developing tomorrow with some heavy falls and squally thunderstorms. For Otago and Southland, remaining showers clearing today. Norwesterly gales at first tomorrow. Then rain spreads from the south in the afternoon and evening, with possible thunderstorms about coastal Southland. Chatham Islands, rain easing to showers today. A few showers and long fine spells tomorrow. It's coming up to 5:07. You're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Exams are about to make a comeback in secondary schools after years of decline. The government has announced an overhaul of the NCEA, which will put more emphasis on external assessment and stop students from cherry-picking which standards they will attempt. It's also introducing a new literacy and numeracy test after reports that many students with extremely poor reading and math skills had met NCEA requirements. Here's our education correspondent John Gerritsen.
The government made its announcement at Mana College in Porirua, a low decile school where most students rely on internally assessed standards more than exams to get their NCEA certificates. The changes unveiled today include reducing the number of credits needed for each level of the NCEA from 80 to 60, but increasing the amount of knowledge covered by each assessment standard. The Associate Minister of Education, Tracy Martin, says that will make sure teens cover their subjects properly instead of concentrating on a few cherry-picked standards, a practice known as credit farming.
Credit farming is where students sort of pick and choose pieces of an exam maybe to actually get over the final piece of a line, or they aim for subjects that they think might be easier to do so that they get the number of credits that get them across the line for the whole of the NCEA.
The government is also abolishing the $76.70 annual fee for NCEA, effective immediately. The head boy at Mana College, Alex Johnson, says that will make a big difference for a lot of people.
Yeah, I do know some mates that have struggled in the past, and they had to go to some teachers and kind of ask them to get help in that, and really trying to go to a teacher and asking them for some help financial-wise, it's real difficult.
But the impact of other changes is less clear. Students will be able to resubmit assignments to get a better grade only if their first attempt was a fail. In addition, half of all achievement standards will be exam-based, and the government's introducing a new literacy and numeracy test that will be externally graded. That's because of strong evidence showing that many people who meet the minimum NCEA requirements cannot pass a test of basic literacy and numeracy. But some of the students at Mana College are not keen on exams.
I personally hate exams because it's like there's this, the test and bang, you have to pass it or else.
Overall, the school's principal, John Murdoch, says the changes are promising. He says getting rid of fees will have a huge impact for students from low-income families.
Whatever it is, $80 for a student doesn't seem like much, but if you've got 4 or 5 in a family, that's going to add up.
As for the plan to have a new literacy and numeracy test, Mr Murdoch says it's not the test that matters, but how well children are taught.
I just want to come back to that, those middle years and the need for students to be well grounded in really strong foundation literacy and numeracy. And that's not going to happen through assessment. That's going to happen through quality teaching.
Teachers and principals are still analysing the changes, but they're likely to approve of anything that reduces their workloads. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerrits in TNA.
The Associate Education Minister says she's not sure who's responsible for raising teachers' pay expectations to unrealistic levels, but it certainly isn't this government. A mega strike is planned for May 29th, with 50,000 teachers expected to walk off the job over ongoing pay disputes for both primary and secondary teachers. Now, as you heard there, the government says it's making some big changes to NCEA. So I asked the Associate Minister of Education, Tracy Martin, whether NCEA currently lacks credibility.
No, but I think after a number of years of having NCEA there, that what the review has said is that there are ways that we can make it simpler, we can streamline it, and we can give better supports to the way students learn. So if we talk about the numeracy and literacy credits, often I think the general population sort of thinks that numeracy and literacy is English and math, whereas actually it's about the functional skills that everybody needs for everyday life, like reading news stories and editorials and reading charts and being able to divide and multiply. So those 20 credits that have been wrapped up inside NCEA Level 1, Level 2 and Level 3 are going to be sort of siloed off and developed independently, and students from Year 7 are going to be able to start to achieve those particular numeracy and literacy credits.
So, how is it possible to get through NCEA without those fundamental skills then? How has that been possible?
Because it has actually been, they have been wrapped up in the other subject areas. One of the positives about actually separating them out and making them 20 credits on their own and giving students the opportunity from Year 7 to do that is we can be a lot more, a lot clearer, I suppose, that they are actually able to do the numerate and literate tasks that we believe they need for everyday life.
So I'm just wondering, the independent grading, the external grading, have teachers been overestimating their students' abilities, or what? Well,
I think it's more likely that actually because they've been wound up with other topics, and so numeracy and literacy were part of that wider level of qualification, that we haven't had the focus that we could have had on it. One of the reasons for making sure that we have external assessment of the numeracy and literacy credits is actually to take weight off teachers. Now, let's be clear. I think we need to remember that we're dealing in a digital age. We're talking about the opportunity for students to be able to prove that they have these skills through multiple ways. So it's not sitting an exam and then posting it off. But we didn't want to put, or my understanding is the task force didn't want to put more pressure on teachers with another assessment here.
Well, speaking of pressure on teachers, you've got a mega strike on the way. Is there a crisis in education?
Well, we acknowledged that there was one, and that was around teacher numbers and so on before we came in.
But is there still one? Is there still one now?
What we've got, well, how would I put this? We certainly haven't, in the 18 months that we've been here, we certainly haven't been able to train the number of teachers that we need to be able to start having really solid conversations about class size and other areas that the teaching profession wants us to. Because many of the things they're asking us for, you need more teachers to do that. Hence why $95 million was announced the other day to train more teachers, because we have to get to that space. We have offered what we believe is a very good offer for the times that we are in, e.g. the other demands on the government, which is on average for the majority of teaching staff another $10,000 within a 24-month period. There are areas I'm working on, learning support delivery plan, the learning support coordinators, to take some of the weight that our teaching staff are under inside their classrooms because the students don't have the support they need. So we're working on multiple areas while at the same time having these negotiations.
And I do understand that, but the teachers believe there is still a crisis in education, and I suppose this is a really important benchmark to establish. It's a bit like the housing situation, so I'm asking you whether you think there is still a crisis in education, because the teachers do.
At the moment, the majority of what I'm hearing from the teachers is that they believe that there's a crisis around their pay and around retention.
Do you agree with them?
I think, I don't know that I would categorise it as a crisis, but I would certainly agree that our teaching staff over a number of years have become weighed down by the system and what is being asked of them. Hence why we are trying to not only change and give them more salary, but we're also trying to change many of the systems around them to minimise some of that stress and some of that workload.
So, Minister, do you think their expectations are realistic, the teachers' expectations, because they would like more money that's being offered and better conditions? Are those expectations realistic?
We are working on the better conditions as fast as we can. Hence, learning support, trying to get more teachers into the workplace, those sort of things. We are working on those as much as we can, minimising excessive administrative obligations and things like that. But with regard to the money, there is just no way that this government has 3.2, I think, combined. Is it 3.2 combined that the unions are asking us for, $3.2 billion? We just don't have that.
So they're realistic. Well, I suppose it flows on that you think their expectations are unrealistic then. Would that be fair?
I think right at this moment in time, my personal view is that their expectations around the money that we can put in their pockets is unrealistic.
So how come those expectations have been raised? Who is responsible for raising their expectations?
I actually don't know, because I remember being on the campaign trail with Chris Hipkins, and I remember him being asked by audiences, will you dedicate yourself to a certain pay increase or whatever for teachers? And I remember him specifically saying it would be a very foolish member of Parliament who did contract negotiations on the campaign trail. So I'm sorry, I don't know who the unions are talking about or who people are talking about when they say that Labor raised their expectations. I did not see Minister Hipkins do that during the campaign trail.
Is there money that's being spent elsewhere that you think should go into teachers' pay? If you say there's a limited amount of money, are you sure that, you wouldn't be better off redirecting some of your spend into teachers' pay?
Well, we're trying to redirect $1.2 billion,
and they say it's not enough, which is the issue, isn't it? You're kind of at loggerheads.
We are, which is why we really need to get into facilitation, because, Minister Hipkins came to Cabinet in the first instance and asked for a particular envelope. That envelope was rejected right at the beginning. He came back.
What was the envelope he first asked for?
It was around $600 million, and then there was $700 million was the increase that was on the table. And Cabinet said we cannot, with all the other demands that we have, we cannot go higher. But we do want to stay at the table talking. And we're happy to go into facilitation again. There are lots of things we can do that, like the learning support coordinators, that is one of the areas that teachers told us will take pressure off them.
Yeah, but despite all the things,
will be on the ground.
Despite all the things that you've got, that you have given or put in place in education, like bumping up the recruitment package, like that learning support, all of those things, teachers already know about them. Doesn't change the fact that they think they deserve more money and better conditions. Is there one thing that you think that you can stump up with that's going to change the impasse here?
Well, unless we get to the table with regard to facilitation, then I personally don't know what it is.
Well, that leaves you between a rock and a hard place, doesn't it?
Well, I think what it does is it says that the negotiators, and please remember that ministers aren't allowed inside the negotiating room, so the two negotiating teams have to come back to the table. We won't find what that is until we keep sitting down and talking through.
And that's Associate Minister of Education Tracy Martin there. It is about 5:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We'd love your feedback, particularly on education. Obviously, it's a big topic today. NCEA, tell the truth. Do you really understand how it works? Do you think these changes, more exams, less internal assessment, are the better way to go? And of course, the mega strike. How's that going to affect you? Do you support the teachers' quest in terms of their pay round? Now, you can get in touch with us via text 2101. You can tweet us at checkpointrnz or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. An Auckland school which used essential oils in classrooms was offered discounts and deals by a sales rep who said they could help with relaxing blends for parents in the wake of the Christchurch terror attacks. Emails released to Checkpoint under the Official Information Act show weeks of correspondence between the principal of Milford School and a representative from the controversial doTERRA company that led to the school signing up to $2,000 worth of the product. The oils were pulled from classrooms after a parent raised concerns that their asthmatic child would be affected. But how did they get into the school in the first place? Nita Blake-Person reports.
It was an excited Sue Cattle who announced in Milford School's March 14th newsletter that the school would be getting diffusers with essential oils in every classroom. The principal said some classes had trialled the diffusers in 2018 and there was a noticeable difference in behaviour and illness reduction.
Shortly, every class will have a blend called On Guard, which supports immune function, and a blend of wild orange, which is uplifting for mood and energy. These oils are diffused in water and waft through the air. We hope to see wellness improve for everyone this term. We will hold a parent information session on this initiative later this term.
The oils were to be provided by US-based company doTERRA, which Ms Cattle had applied for $2,800 in funding from the PTA for, to reduce bugs and increase feelings of well-being. Emails show she had earlier been approached by a doTERRA rep whose name has been redacted from the emails but who appears to be connected to the school. The rep states they are often at the school's back entrance offering a sniff of wild orange to mums and new entrants having separation anxiety and that it transforms their state instantly.
This has been life-changing for my family's health. My son no longer uses his inhaler for asthma and just applies the respiratory blend of eucalyptus and peppermint roll-on to his chest. The oils are scientifically proven with decades of clinical trials. They are no longer for hippies.
This correspondence between Milford School's principal and the doTERRA rep goes on for several weeks before and after the newsletter announcement. In one exchange, Sue Cattle says she's received a question from a parent around whether there's research showing the oils don't have any negative effects.
Hi Sue, thanks for your email. I totally understand how busy you are. I can make you a principal's de-stress blend. We have never had a reaction reported to the Medical Association from diffusing doTERRA therapeutic grade essential oils with any children.
The doTERRA rep also offers deals to the school for using its products.
If any teachers wish to get oils for their own health or home use, Milford School can earn 20% commission, which potentially they can use to get some free oils for their classroom in future.
And there's also the opportunity for teachers to make their own blends.
Our wonderful doTERRA community has been making peace blends and sleep blends to give to all the Christchurch community after the tragic shooting. We all sent oils and blends down. This is also something we can help any Milford teachers or parents with, especially the Muslim parents, but even Kiwi parents struggling mentally to switch off. Should we say something in the newsletter to get in touch with me or just set up a date and time to meet?
But the oil plans came to a halt after a parent sent a letter to the school warning the diffusers could impact their son's health.
The principal made the decision without consideration of adverse health effects for students who suffer from allergies or who have asthma. I will not have my son exposed to these products in the classroom.
They also raised concerns about the company making the oils, doTERRA.
If you Google this brand, you discover the true nature of this business is a multi-level marketing company. sometimes referred to as a pyramid selling scheme. Even if there was some legitimate basis to use essential oils in the classroom, as a parent, I would be deeply concerned about the involvement of this company. I would want to know who is behind the marketing and sale of these products to the school, funded by donations to the PTA, and who is profiting from the sale.
Ms Cattle relayed this information onto the rep, saying she was gutted but had no choice but to leave the oils in the cupboards for now.
Dear Sue, I am so sorry to hear this one parent has ruined it for every other child. How can I support you? I will definitely drop you off for de-stress and sleep blend over the weekend.
The structure for doTERRA's business shows a 7-tier model, with those in the bottom silver ranking making an average $25,000 a year, and those in the top presidential diamond earning an average of $1.3 million per year. But the rep assures Ms Cattle it's not a pyramid scheme.
Pyramid schemes do not sell product. They sell a dream asking people to put money in they never get a return on. They are expensive to get into and hard to get out of. doTERRA has 7.5 million customers, so this is not an experiment. The heart of the company is philanthropic, changing lives locally and globally.
Milford School is no longer using doTERRA's products in its classroom, and it's understood they received a refund on their purchase. For Checkpoint, Nita Blake-Person.
And I'm sure you may have some views on that. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. You can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. I'm just wondering whether we need a truth serum on Checkpoint. We're already getting some of your feedback on NCEA and also the mega strike. And Gary says teachers can have either extra resources and smaller pay increases, or fewer resources and higher pay increases, but not both. While this texter is noting the teachers' dispute is a workload issue as well as a pay issue. Richard, who describes himself as a suffering partner of a hardworking teacher, says, can someone please ask what National did in 9 years for teachers? 9 years, he repeats with 4 exclamation marks. On NCEA, Kent has texted in to say to us, I suggest that our education system could be improved by having less report writing for teachers. And that, of course, is what Tracy Martin was saying, less pressure on teachers to do that, but also to, guarantee the credibility of NCEA were some of the reasons given for the changes. The United Nations Secretary-General has sounded a doomsday climate change warning on his New Zealand visit, but praised this country's aspirations in aiming to be carbon neutral by 2050. Antonio Guterres was quizzed by high school and university students today on how the UN might better twist the arms of world leaders to move to green economies and slow the rapid rise of the Earth's temperature. Alex Perrottet went along with camera operators Dan Cook and Nick Munro to see what answers he could give.
A Pacific welcome for the world's top diplomat, here on a whirlwind trip, but with enough time to engage with students at AUT's South Campus in Manukau. And with so many Pacific people at risk of environmental dangers and the knock-on public health effects, his message was clear.
Climate change is, in my opinion, the defining issue of our time, the biggest threat to our lives and to the life of the planet. And we are not winning the battle against climate change.
In practical terms, Antonio Guterres says there's 3 major tasks, and it's no secret that many countries are way behind deadline.
It is absolutely essential to move taxation from salaries to carbon. It is absolutely essential to stop the subsidies to fossil fuels. From 2020 onwards, not any more coal power plants to be built, because we need to have a green economy and not a grey economy.
But the UN Secretary-General sounded a disappointed note when confessing that many of his ilk have all but given up.
It is clear my generation is having enormous difficulties in assuming responsibilities in relation to climate change.
He said current leaders have lost the political will, and they won't be around to suffer what he called the catastrophe of a global temperature rise higher than 1.5 degrees by the end of the century. So, Mr. Guterres challenged the youth to act, prompting one student to throw the ball back into his court.
It might be too late to wait for us to get into power before those effects are irreversible. So my question to you would be, what is going to be your role in your tenure as Secretary General, and what will the United Nations do to help address this issue before it's too late?
I'm not waiting for you to be in power. I'm waiting for you to be as noisy as possible now. And to mobilize societies, your parents, your families, your friends, and to put your governments under pressure. That's what I'm asking you now. And then when you'll come to power, I hope that things will be much better.
But the noise has been made for years, especially from Pacific Island leaders who have pointed the finger of blame at the big polluters, accusing them of causing their rising sea levels, drought and high water temperatures that bleach coral and kill fish. Mr Guterres says he's frustrated at the UN Security Council permanent members and their veto power. After all, 3 of them, the US, China and Russia, are among the largest global CO2 emitters. So another student asked how Mr Guterres will get those polluters to change their ways.
What does the United Nations have planned for countries that are not fulfilling their commitment or duty to the 2016 Paris Climate Agreement?
Name and shame. We don't have instruments to punish. So, name and shame.
Naming and shaming hasn't exactly worked out for Pacific nations. Even as the Secretary-General was addressing this crowd, Fiji's Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama was speaking in Suva at a climate action conference, saying Pacific Island countries have to look at changing their economies to deal with the impacts rather than wait around for others to stop causing harm. The young, energetic students here at AUT gave the impression that they doubted whether the United Nations was even listening to the youth. Mr Guterres promised that it would engage more, but he says it's hard to get the adults to adapt to new ways.
We are changing our communication strategy. It was a very old-fashioned communication strategy. When I arrived in the UN, there were 3 colleagues dealing with social media and 60 with radio. So, as you see, we tend to be a rather old-fashioned organization. Now we are completely changing that, but the resistance is big.
Antonio Guterres flies to Christchurch before moving on to Fiji, Vanuatu and Tuvalu. The Foreign Minister Winston Peters will travel with Mr Guterres tomorrow, ahead of a Pacific Islands Forum leaders meeting in Suva on Wednesday. In Manukau for Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, the locals battling a mining company over a place described as New Zealand's Pompeii. British TV's big night at the BAFTAs. And after 6, what do parents think of the mega strike and changes to NCEA? Do get in touch with your thoughts on anything you've heard on the program today. Text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But now it's time for the headlines with Susanna.
Teenagers are likely to sit more exams as a result of the government's overhaul of the NCEA school qualification. The government says internal assessment creates too much work for students and teachers. Other changes announced today include abolishing NCEA fees and introducing a literacy and numeracy test. Primary school teachers and principals are considering the possibility of further industrial action if the mega strike in 2 weeks' time doesn't shift the government's pay offer. 50,000 teachers belonging to the NZEI and the Post-Primary Teachers Association plan to strike on May the 29th. The acting Prime Minister is blaming the sale of the iconic Tip Top brand to the global ice cream giant Fonterra on Fonterra's financial management. The dairy cooperative bought the business in 2001 but didn't want to spend to invest in upgrading the business as it looks to cut debt and get back to basics. Winston Peters says Fonterra's payment of multi-million-dollar salaries to managers has led to a top added value company going to offshore ownership. A Muslim leader says the latest payout to victims of the Christchurch Mosque's attacks will bring them some comfort. As well as more money to the next of kin and those injured, a lump sum of $12,000 is being given to people who were in the mosques during the shootings but weren't injured. Ahmad Zainuddin from the Distribution Committee of Islamic Organisations says those who witnessed the atrocities are also victims and struggling to cope. The jury in the trial of a former teacher charged with indecency offences has not reached a decision and will return tomorrow. Benjamin Christopher Missy Swan has been on trial for 2 weeks at the High Court in Auckland, where he has denied 11 charges of indecent acts on a young person. Cabinet ministers have officially signed off on a raft of new rules for rental homes, but they won't apply to all properties until July 2024. In February, The government announced the so-called Healthy Home Standards, which set minimum requirements for heating, insulation and ventilation. Those are the headlines, the latest headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. You're listening to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen and you're Nona Peltier joining me for business. Hey, so ice cream's a big topic of conversation today. This is the sale of Tip Top for $380 million.
Yeah, and that's actually quite a good price, according to analysts. And Fonterra has said itself that it was about $100 million more than its book value. So it priced it at, about 280. They looked for a buyer in New Zealand for the company, but no one wanted to pay the premium price that Fonterra was hoping for. And, of course, Fonterra was willing to pay and did. And they're willing to invest more. How much, we don't know, but we do know that the company Tip Top needs some investment in plant machinery and so on. It's a bit run down. Fonterra didn't want to invest in it. That's the reason it sold. Plus, it was saddled with an enormous amount of debt, $800 million. So it was a sale they had to make, really.
Do we know if it's going to keep the association, the brand association, Tip Top? Do we know anything about that?
Yeah, they're going to keep the brands because, actually, Fonterra was a joint venture, was established 2016 between the big food giant Nestle and a very large ice cream manufacturer out of the UK called R&R. And together they set up this company to acquire brands and bring them all together. So they have loads of brands all over the world. And New Zealand, this is the first New Zealand brand. No, they're going to keep it. This is what they do. They don't promote their own brand. They promote the other types of brands. And so they have an enormous number of them. And the Tip Top will just be incorporated into that. But they do plan to keep the plant machinery here in New Zealand. They say they're going to do that. But they haven't said how much they're going to invest to make that work. So that remains to be seen. But that's at least what the company has said so far.
Right, and was it you that spoke to Miles Hurrell? Or?
I wasn't the one who spoke to Miles Hurrell. No, he was in Dunedin, and he spoke with journalists there, and what he basically said was that, yes, Tip Top is a brand that means a lot to New Zealand, but it will continue to, and this is what he had to say to the journalists there.
It is an iconic brand, as you said, right from the outset, but we need to do the right thing for our co-op and our shareholders, and there'll be some certain people looking around selling that business to offshore, but remembering it's only been in Fonterra's ownership since 2001. Prior to that, it was owned by offshore entities.
Why was this offer so compelling compared to other offers on the table? As
I say, the New Zealand piece of it, remaining the manufacturing assets in New Zealand is a really important part of it, and their ability to invest in the brand and see what's been done with Tip Top brand in the early days and how they can take it to the next level.
And that's the chief executive of Fonterra, Miles Hurrell.
So this Fonterra, am I saying it right?
I think it's Fonterra.
So
Fonterra with an F-R. Fonterra. Yeah.
So what other brands do they make that we would recognise?
Okay, Ben & Jerry's is one.
Yeah. Okay.
Haagen-Dazs is another, I believe.
Okay, so some really quite big names and brands in the business.
And Tip Top.
And Tip Top now.
And Tip Top, exactly.
And obviously offshore, as you say, investor, because obviously Winston Peters has had things to say about that today.
Well, he always has something to say about overseas investment, doesn't he? And fair enough, that's his whole position, isn't it? A political decision. He likes to suggest that we can own everything within New Zealand, but it's interesting. Tip Top has come in and out of New Zealand ownership. This is the first time it's been foreign owned, and it still remained an iconic brand, so it remains to be seen. There are other things that are owned by foreigners, and in this case, I think the history of Tip Top is that it was a brand established in the 1930s in Wellington. It was a milk bar. And then, of course, it was held in New Zealand ownership for some time, but then it moved over to Heinz. It was later acquired by the Australian ice cream maker Peters and Brown, and then bought back by Fonterra. So it's
had a back and forth history.
It has. Yeah. It's not always been. It's still a New Zealand brand, and there's no reason to suggest that this company that's paid a premium would sort of make that brand disappear.
Hey, other stuff happening today. Tauranga-based Trust Power. Now, you've had a look at their full year profit. It's dropped off.
It has. Look, I think the power companies have been under a little bit of, it's been difficult. We had also a report from Iridian today as well. So the cost of generation is increasing because of hydro lakes not performing to their full capacity. And so uneven weather temperatures and that kind of thing has made it a little bit difficult for power companies. And what we've seen here is that Trustpower's full year profit is down. It was $93 million compared with last year's $129 million. And so while that's just basically they had to supply power at a higher price, locked in so they were basically providing it at a loss. And that's how it kind of works out with these companies, because they have supply agreements. If they say they're going to provide you with the power at a certain price, but it costs them more to get it, they still have to give it to you at that price.
And suck it up.
And that's what we've seen with Meridian too. So we're going to see some mixed earnings, I think, with the electricity companies, which are mostly, this one reports on the March 31st year, but others report at the June year. So it'll take a little longer to figure out what happens with them.
And markets today, what's been going on generally?
Interesting. We are performing
Is it ever boring?
Not to me.
Yeah,
I hope it's not to anyone, really. Yeah, so look, Asian markets have been weak with the uncertainty over what's going to happen next with the trade talks between China and the United States. They've packed a sad for sure. But not here in New Zealand. We've broken a record again. We finished up 0.25%. That's 27 points up to 10,127. Our dollar is trading 65.8. It's still weak, relatively speaking, and that, of course, is because of the trade worries, but not just that, because of our interest rates and so on. 94.3 Australian, and that's because the Australian dollar has been really taking quite a hit. And 50.6 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with Business News. You're listening to RNZ National, and this, of course, is Checkpoint. We ran a story earlier in the program about essential oils that were in one school in Auckland, except a parent complained about them and then they were removed. We've had a bit of feedback on this. Essential oils, this person says, are scientific nonsense and have no place in a secular, rational education system. That's from Dr. Graham Sharp, an anaesthetist, who says, feel free to state my name. There you go, Dr. Graham. We have. Helen says doTERRA sounds like the new Amway. Natural does not equate to safe. Arsenic is natural. I know of people using these oils in cooking, but they have the potential to be dangerously toxic. Beware cutely marketed snake oil in New Zealand, says Helen. Thank you very much for your feedback. Do keep it coming. Text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Checkpoint at RNZ, I should say. More money being distributed to help people affected by the Christchurch mosque attacks will include, for the first time, people who were present at the two mosques but not physically injured. The money raised by victim support via Give a Little in the weeks following the attacks will be paid out this week. It includes extra money for the next of kin of the 51 people who died and the 38 people who were injured in the March 15 shootings. Andrew McRae reports.
Victim support's been widely criticised for delaying payments to those affected by the mosque attacks, and particularly for not including people who were present at the mosques but not physically injured. It's already paid out $3.5 million, and today it revealed how a further $3.5 million will be distributed. Another $15,000 will go to the families of the deceased, adding to the $30,000 they've already received. Those injured will get $12,000 on top of the $13,000 they've already been paid. And 283 people who are at the mosques but not injured will receive $12,000 each. The latest payments bring the total to $7 million from more than $10.5 million raised by victim support through Give a Little. Ahmed Zainuddin from the Distribution Committee representing Islamic organisations says delays in handing out the money couldn't be helped. He says the latest payments will be of comfort to those affected.
But there will be some people who will question why they're getting 12,000 as the same as the one that's injured. But I think they were not given anything for the first two tranches. They didn't get anything.
As a witness to the shooting at the Linwood Mosque, where 7 people died, Shuaib Ghani will this week receive $12,000 from victim support. While the organisation had funded his trip home to India to see family, this was the first payment he would receive. He's in Christchurch studying towards a construction management qualification and says all of the money would go towards reducing his $40,000 student loan.
No matter what situation is, I have to still keep working, earning money because, I'm under a big loan and the loan has been taken on the account of my home in India. So if I don't pay back my loan, the bank will take my home. So it's a pretty tight situation. So I got to work no matter what. And $12,000 is a big help.
Mr. Ghani has struggled to process what he saw at the mosque on March the 15th. It took him over a month before he was able to return for prayers. Now he goes every night.
I still struggle with sleeps, but it's much better than before. Just came back from India, saw my family, and people are here helping. Beautiful people, nice people, talking well. And the mosque is also, very helpful. It's the month of Ramadan, so I go every day in the mosque to, open my fast, break my fast. So it's pretty good. I'm getting better.
Trina Watkin was one of the people behind a petition demanding that donated money be handed out much sooner. She's happy progress is now being made, but is still critical of the way victim support has handled it up until now.
These Give a Little pages, they are, really commonplace now. So I guess it's don't put your hand up unless you know that you're going to be able to facilitate the money quickly and where it needs to go.
She says the public gave with the expectation money would be distributed quickly.
When people trust you with their hard-earned money, you need to honour that. I'm glad that they are honouring it now, even though it's it's late, but they have time and a reasonable amount of money to get it to the right people.
The final tranche of money from the appeal will be handed out next month, although $1 million will be held back as a contingency to help with any emergency expenses and to provide financial assistance to new victims who are yet to come forward. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Ko Andrew McRae-Tene.
It's shaping up as something of a David versus Goliath battle as some members of a small Otago community prepare to fight an international mining company. What's at stake is a geological treasure trove described as New Zealand's Pompeii. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown has the story.
The hills surrounding Middlemarch are as barren as they are breathtaking. But it's what's hiding in plain sight that has put the small town in the crosshairs of Plum Global, a mining company with several permits around the South Island.
It's the only one of its kind in New Zealand. It's the only one spanning at this particular age range in the Southern Hemisphere.
That's Associate Professor Daphne Lee describing Folden Maar, a 23-million-year-old crater lake which contains over 100,000 years of fossils. It is a window into New Zealand's distant past, which doesn't exist anywhere else in the country.
Everything that fell into the lake or was living in the lake or blew into the lake is basically fell to the bottom and is pickled there. So the preservation is absolutely extraordinary. The range of fossils is great. Leaves, flowers, fish, including the world's oldest galaxid fossils. But the creme de la creme has been the discovery by one of my PhD students and then my postdoctoral fellow, Uwe Kalfuss, of fossil insects.
When work started, there were 7 insects known from New Zealand's fossil record. Folden Maar has already turned up about 250, many new to science. But that's where Plumman enters the story. They want to take the diatomite and grind it up to add to animal feed for pigs, chickens and turkeys. Middlemarch residents Andrea Bosshard and Shane Loader are shocked by the plan.
This material, once it's gone, it's completely gone. There's no going back to look at it. And there's future generations who are going to need that information.
Plumman bought the mine in 2014. A report from Goldman Sachs, which was leaked to the Otago Daily Times, suggests for the operation to be feasible, they need to purchase an adjoining farm and mine all the diatomite from the area. The company did not respond to Checkpoint's request for an interview, but Shane Loader says many in the Middlemarch area are strongly opposed to that.
There are people I understand within the community that do support this proposal by Plowman, but they're not coming out to talk to us.
A meeting at the weekend garnered about 30 locals, all unanimously opposed to exploiting the area's natural resources. But the leaked report suggests Plumman doesn't think it'll have much of a fight on its hands.
To paraphrase the Goldman Sachs report, they said that they consider us too poor and too ignorant to put up a successful fight. Sure, they've got a lot more money than we have, but you've got to draw a line in the sand or a line in the diatomite if you want and make the stand. It's a David and Goliath fight. That's what it is, but David won.
And they've gained an ally in recent days with significant clout. Former Prime Minister Helen Clark.
I find it quite shocking, and I think it's a question of values. Do we value science and knowledge, or are we prepared to stand by and see the site which would generate that knowledge destroyed by a mining operation? In many countries, a site like this would be in permanent protection already.
Helen Clark wants to see the site permanently protected. Strathtyre Community Board Chair Barry Williams is taking a more guarded position on the mine.
I think till a few more things come out that people can
lot to digest. I'm very neutral. I'm sitting right on the fence, particularly as a community board person.
But without approval from the Overseas Investment Office to buy the adjoining farm, the whole proposal falls over. Opponents are calling on the OIO to protect the country's natural history. From Otago, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
It is about 11 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keep your feedback coming. We're getting quite a lot in on the education system, changes to the NCEA and the planned mega strike. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email us checkpoint@rnz.co.nz and we'll try to get to some of that feedback before 6. The government's controversial Provincial Growth Fund has committed nearly $1.8 billion of its $3 billion war chest, but the opposition isn't convinced taxpayers are getting bang for buck. The update comes after the Auditor-General last month said he would increase the scrutiny of the fund and its management amid concerns about how some of the funding has been allocated. Our reporter Charlie Drever was at the briefing and filed this report.
The government established the 3-year fund to raise the productivity of regional New Zealand as part of Labour's coalition deal with New Zealand First. One of the areas to benefit is Greymouth, which received $750,000 to dredge the lagoon, and Mayor Tony Cockshawn says it's been a godsend.
If the dredging work wasn't done, our port would come to a standstill. The fish factories wouldn't be able to unload from the fishing boats that are bringing in huge amounts of fish, tuna, hoki, and all types of other fish from the Hoki Trench. The tuna season alone and hoki season brings in over 80 vessels permanent into the port.
Tony Cockshawn says ratepayers simply couldn't have covered the cost, but the flow-on effects will be felt throughout the district. But Regional Economic Development Minister Shane Jones told a briefing today that not all of the $3 billion fund would be spent by the end of the 3 years.
I've always said not a cent will be left in terms of unallocated putea. It's one thing for ministers to take cabinet-mandated allocation decisions, then it's another thing for the funds to be fully assigned and projects completed. In respect of transport, those projects will go beyond the next election.
The New Zealand First MP says roading has been his greatest frustration.
It does get quite challenging as the Regional Development Minister once the putea goes to independent entities via the Ministry of Transport, such as NCEA. When I say frustration, because obviously every time I move around the motu, people are invariably hoha with what they see as the problems of their regional roads, and yet we have given some putea over for some of those roads.
Shane Jones says he has asked the Office of the Auditor-General to investigate how efficiently those entities are delivering their portion of the fund. The biggest concern for National Party Regional Economic Development spokesperson Paul Goldsmith is the lack of follow-up.
We're halfway through the parliamentary cycle and we've been told that they've allocated more than half of the $3 billion. And yet we still, they admit, don't have any clear framework in place to evaluate the success or otherwise of where the money is being spent.
Robert Pagoo, who's the head of the Provincial Development Unit, which oversees the fund, says it will be years before the full impact of the projects will be realised. He says their staff will be checking in with successful applicants who will be asked to provide hard data.
The number of jobs that have been created, the number of local people that have been employed, training courses, what additional businesses have been created as a result of those investments into their particular projects.
Paul Goldsmith says that's hopelessly inadequate. However, New Zealand First leader Winston Peters isn't about to have the fund's success questioned.
This idea that somehow all the jobs appear on day one when you make the investment demonstrates, but it's how many parliamentarians have had no business background whatsoever. And we do not intend to put up with that sort of cynicism and urban grind against the export wealth-creating people of this country any longer.
More light is expected to be shed on the fund after a review of the Provincial Development Units is completed in October. So far, the fund has created 560 jobs, although officials have been unable to confirm how many of them are permanent. In Wellington, for Checkpoint, Charlie Drever.
More evidence has emerged about the potentially harmful effects of whitening agents which are added to our food and medicine. Researchers at the University of Sydney had found that a common whitening agent, titanium dioxide, affects bacteria in the gut and could trigger serious diseases, including colorectal cancer. Food standard authorities say there's no evidence of health risks, but France has announced a ban and consumer advocates are calling for a wider crackdown. The ABC's Lexi Methrel has more.
Titanium dioxide has no nutritional or preservative value, but it's cheap and makes food bright white. Products that contain it include popular brands of confectionery with hard shells, chewing gum and medicines. Associate Professor at the University of Sydney, Wojciech Szynovsky, is concerned it's harming us.
The amount which we consume is really big. If you consider single lolly, it contains actually really large number of nanoparticles.
Titanium dioxide is a nanoparticle, meaning it's thousands of times smaller than a strand of hair. It's described as colouring 171 on food packaging. New research from Professor Szynovsky says it changes the activity of bacteria in the gut, potentially triggering conditions including inflammatory bowel disease and colorectal cancer.
Unfortunately, there is increasing evidence that nanoparticles affect our body, how it functions, and the body of the literature is growing and growing and growing.
The Australian food regulator says it monitors the issue of nanotechnologies closely. In a statement, Food Standards Australia New Zealand says,
titanium dioxide is a food additive which is approved internationally in a range of food products and has been used safely for decades. In 2015, Food Standards Australia New Zealand commissioned a review of the safety of titanium dioxide, which found there is no evidence of health risks from consumption of the food-grade material.
That's in line with the view of the European Food Safety Authority. But European consumer advocates say there's too much uncertainty and they want titanium dioxide banned across the continent. Camille Perrin is from the European Consumer Organisation.
Many products containing this additive are sweets, confectionery, which are very often eaten by children, by teenagers, by young consumers. So it's very important to protect their health.
Professor Szynovsky says consumers shouldn't panic, but they should be aware.
Our body is really well prepared to cope with this kind of invasions. The problem is that we are overexposed, and this is more as a call for the conversation with the government, with the regulatory bodies, to look on the regulations again.
Food Standards says it will review the latest study.
Lexi Methrel reporting there. It is about 4 minutes away from 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The feminist spy drama Killing Eve has emerged as the biggest winner at Britain's most prestigious TV award ceremony. It won the BAFTA for Best Drama Series along with 2 of the main acting categories. The BBC's Colin Patterson was watching the ceremony at the Royal Festival Hall in London and has filed this report.
And the BAFTA goes to Killing Eve.
It was a great night for Killing Eve at the BAFTAs. The BBC show about a Russian assassin and the British spies trying to stop her was a triple award winner. It was named Best Drama Series. After a lifetime on the stage, there was a first ever BAFTA win for Fiona Shaw, Best Supporting Actress, and the Liverpudlian Jodie Comer was named Leading Actress for playing the psychopathic anti-hero Villanelle. Afterwards, Killing Eve's creator Phoebe Waller-Bridge explained why she thought it had been such a hit.
I feel like it's the abandon with which this cast kind of grabbed the stories, which is just women being obsessed with other women. I feel like it's just someone being a little bit transgressive, and I think they all are. And I think that it shows that little bits of ourselves that we would probably like to let out every now and again.
After 7 attempts, Benedict Cumberbatch won his first BAFTA, leading actor, for playing the title role in Sky Atlantic's Patrick Melrose, about a Brit in New York trying to exorcise the demons of his childhood. It was a role he campaigned to get.
I couldn't have won it for something I'm more proud of, to be honest. I cared about this project from the minute I read the books, and lo and behold, the gods answered. I was the right guy at the right time, and really do breathe rarefied air. I'm very lucky.
And that's Benedict Cumberbatch ending that report from Colin Patterson. Lots of feedback on education NCEA today. Let's get to some of it. Lee has texted us. Lee, mammoth effort texting this in, so I want to do you some justice by covering up off your main points. In answer to my question about whether or not you understand NCEA, Lee has got in touch to say, yes, I do understand the current NCEA system, as our son successfully progressed through it and achieved excellence at level 3 last year. From our perspective, the ability to resubmit papers was an excellent teaching and learning tool, as it allowed for specific constructive feedback to be given by the teacher and to be utilised by our son. It was amazingly valuable, and I often thought how I wished our teachers had done that in the old days, says Lee. The teachers really seem to care and be in tune with their students' need. I see it as a shame that our 2 younger sons won't have access to this. Also, I thought the whole point of NCEA, says Lee, was to move away from the more traditional test 'em at the end of the year idea that we suffered through school certificate and the like. I can't honestly see these particular changes as an improvement to learning. Thanks for getting in touch, Lee. Also, this from Jim in Whakatane. All round, very good decisions by the review team and the government on NCEA, says Jim. The terrible thing about the system, the way it developed, was the culture of credit counting it generated in students. These changes should help to redevelop an interest in genuine learning, not just get credits, says Jim. And Peter says, I find it ironic over the years that parents and others in the community who don't understand how NCEA works are able to understand what they want to go from NCEA.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Lei ātaua tēnei. Teenagers are likely to sit more exams as a result of the government's overhaul of the NCEA school qualification. The changes announced today include abolishing NCEA fees and introducing a literacy and numeracy test. The government says achievement standards for each subject will be rewritten, with the aim of making half the standards externally assessed through an exam or portfolio. It says internal assessment creates too much work for students and teachers. The Associate Education Minister Tracy Martin says many teenagers are suffering from stress, and the amount of internal assessment for NCEA is partly to blame. Primary school teachers and principals are considering the possibility of further industrial action if their one-day strike doesn't shift the government's pay offer. More than 750,000 school children will have to stay home when 50,000 secondary and primary teachers strike on May the 29th. Michael Kropp reports.
The PPTA has already decided to take 5 more weeks of industrial action, and primary teachers are thinking the same way, with Fielding Intermediate Principal Diane Crate saying the chatter in her staff room shows they're prepared to take further action if needed. Teachers want more money, more time out of the classroom, and more support for the kids who need it most. They say the government's message of an average $10,000 pay increase is misleading because the beginning teacher rate will only increase by about $4,500 over 3 years. The government says the deal is comprehensive and that there's no more money on offer. Ko Michael Kropp tēnei.
A Muslim leader says the latest payout of money raised for victims of the Christchurch Mosque's attacks will bring them some comfort. The money has been donated through Give a Little and from Muslim groups. As well as more money going to the next of kin and those injured, a lump sum of $12,000 is being given to people who were in the mosques when the shootings happened but escaped unscathed. Ahmad Zainuddin from the Distribution Committee of Islamic Organisations for the Christchurch Massacre says it's important to help those who witnessed the atrocities, as they are also victims.
I think it's good that they also acknowledge there are some people who are really traumatized, and they cannot get support from ACC or something, At least this can help them a bit, because they can't even go to work, I heard, Very traumatized.
Ahmad Zainuddin says he's happy with the transparency of the process. An 18-year-old man charged with possessing the Mosque video and behaving in a threatening manner will go to trial before a jury. The man, who has interim name suppression, entered not guilty pleas at the Christchurch District Court this afternoon. He is one of 7 people who have appeared before the court for possessing or distributing the Mosque video or manifesto after the attacks on March the 15th. All but one have interim name suppression. The 18-year-old has been remanded on bail until next month. The chair of Hawke's Bay's District Health Board is backing a call for formal investigation into Oranga Tamariki's processes when removing babies from hospitals. A board member is concerned Hawke's Bay Hospital may have breached a teenage mother's rights when social workers tried to remove her baby last week and has asked for the Ombudsman to investigate. Anusha Bradley reports.
The board member, Jacoby Poulain, says separating the young woman from her midwives was potentially a denial of the patient's rights to access medical care. The chair, Kevin Atkinson, says the DHB is reviewing the incident, but there would be some benefit in the Ombudsman carrying out a formal review. He says the DHB must follow court orders, and while Oranga Tamariki instructed the hospital to restrict access to the teenager's whānau and midwives, she had a midwife with her at all times. Ko Anusha Bradley Aho.
More than half, $1.77 billion of the $3 billion Provincial Growth Fund has now been committed. In an update today, the Ministry for Business Innovation and Enterprise says about 1,000 applications have been received, with 259 being approved so far. As at February, more than $500 million of those were large-scale investment packages. 286 applications have been turned down so far. The jury in the trial of a former teacher charged with indecency offences has not reached a decision and will return tomorrow. Benjamin Christopher Missy Swan has been on trial for 2 weeks at the High Court in Auckland, where he has denied 11 charges of indecent acts on a young person. This morning, the judge, Justice Duffy, summed up the case. The jury retired just after 1 o'clock to deliberate. A small portion of the population is bearing the brunt of nearly half of all crime. The full findings were released today from a crime and victim survey for which more than 8,000 people over 15 were interviewed last year. It found that just 4% of those surveyed experienced 47% of the crime in the previous year. The Ministry of Justice Chief Executive Andrew Kibblewhite says this may be due to higher rates of crime in areas of deprivation. The survey also found Māori are more likely to experience crime than other ethnicities. Women and men are equally likely to be victims of crime. It's 6:05. The Pulse will want to get their ANZ Netball Premiership campaign back on track when they host the Northern Stars in Wellington tonight. The capital side suffered their first loss in 13 games this season last week when they went down to the Southern Steel by 10 goals. The Pulse are still top of the standings and will be wanting a dominant performance against the Stars with just one round to follow before the playoffs. Centre pass tonight is at 7:40. The captain of the New Zealand women's sevens side says it was satisfying to prevail in a fast and physical Trans-Tasman final at the Canadian leg of the World Series. The reigning world champions were 21-17 winners over Australia this morning, clinching their fourth title from 5 tournaments this season and automatic qualification for next year's Olympics. And Mumbai have become the most successful franchise in the history of cricket's Indian Premier League after a thrilling one-run win over Chennai in this season's final. Three-time champions Chennai needed 2 runs off the final ball, but Lasith Malinga snared an LBW to give Mumbai their 4th title. Former Black Caps strike bowler Shane Bond is the Mumbai bowling coach, and he says they've worked for this title for a long time.
Today is the culmination of a lot of hard work, and I think over the course of the series we've got better and better with the ball as it went on. So we knew 150 was a little below par, but we knew we also had quality bowlers that when the pressure comes on can deliver, and Marley was sensational in that clutch moment.
Shane Bond. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Lynn Freeman looks back on the Venice Biennale. Dana Johansson may be a little bit blue about the result at Eden Park. We celebrate our website's new children's story section with a sparkling tale for kids of all ages, while ahead of her New Zealand tour, Jane Goodall ponders the future of planet Earth. Too many people using up too many resources. On Nights of me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
RNZ National with Indira Stewart setting up your news day on First Up from 5 a.m. tomorrow morning before Corin Dan joins Susie Ferguson on Morning Report from 6. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Manawatu, Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Cloudy periods, isolated showers clearing this evening but returning to western areas later tomorrow. For Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, showers gradually clearing today, fine weather tomorrow. Horowhenua, Kapiti and Wellington, mainly fine, a few showers late tomorrow. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine today, rain developing about the western ranges tomorrow, and a few showers spreading elsewhere late in the day. For Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, fine today apart from the odd shower, rain developing tomorrow with some heavy falls and squally thunderstorms. For Otago and Southland, remaining showers clearing today, northwest gales at first tomorrow, then rain spreading from the south in the afternoon and evening, with possible thunderstorms about coastal Southland. Chatham Islands, rain easing to showers today, a few showers and long fine spells tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're with RNZ National.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The government is scrapping NCEA fees and raising the qualifications literacy and numeracy requirements. The changes are part of a major overhaul of the qualification, which will also put emphasis on external assessment and stop students from cherry-picking which standards they will attempt. Now, parents spoken to by RNZ have welcomed the changes, with some saying they're still struggling to get their head around NCEA. Shirley says, bring back school certificate.
I don't think NCEA is fair. I don't think it's a fair way to judge everybody's learning at all. But actually, I think we're in a failed education system anyway. I think we're getting a bit like America, all dumbed down. We're not supposed to achieve, are we?
And Liz says the changes will help improve basic literacy and numeracy levels. She also supports scrapping the $76.70 annual fee for NCEA, effective immediately.
I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think education should be free all the way through the country, because right up to tertiary level. So I think the beginning of making NCEA free is really important.
And Corrigan Soman, who's on the board of Central Tākaka School in Golden Bay, says assessment and achieving a clear curriculum are not easy things to achieve, but he supports making educational achievement easier for young people.
We need to spend as much as we can in investing in, our children in New Zealand if we want the best sort of outcomes in the future. So anything that makes it easier for children to succeed and for New Zealand to be competitive in the world is something I'd totally support.
Now, Jason says he has had 3 teenagers tackle the NCEA system and he's still trying to understand it. He says it's never been clear whether a student has passed or failed.
To be able to know whether you've passed or whether you've failed, I appreciate that it's not PC nowadays, but it's to me that's a good starting point, because once you get into the workforce, people don't, you either pass or you fail when you're out there. You don't get any of that flexibility when you're in the workforce.
Now, just some of the reactions today from parents to news the NCEA system is getting an overhaul. Let us know your thoughts on this. Is there too much credit for farming or concentrating on a few cherry-picked standards and not enough focus on basic numeracy and literacy? Text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is 11 minutes after 6. Parents are being forced to find alternative arrangements for their children ahead of a nationwide teachers' strike at the end of the month. 50,000 primary and secondary teachers will walk off the job on May 29th, following the rejection of a combined pay offer worth around $1.2 billion. Over 750,000 students will be affected by the latest strike, but the government says there isn't any more money to meet demands. Michael Kropp reports.
Normally, a day off school would be an exciting prospect.
Yeah, I kind of am looking for a day off, I've just been, kind of just get to relax now.
But for these pupils at Mana College in Porirua, staying home on the 29th of May will be bittersweet because they support their teachers' reasons to strike.
They're doing their real long shifts, staying 2-3 hours after school.
Teachers do help students a lot, even outside of school.
They want the best for us, so I feel like they deserve it.
So whose side are you on? Government or teachers?
Teachers.
Yeah.
The teachers want more money, more time out of the classroom and more support for the kids who need it most. And they say they've come too far to back down now. And even though the mega strike will be inconvenient for many families, they've got a lot of parental support.
Yeah, I do actually support their claim. I wish that they could agree outside of the strike actions.
I'd prefer that they'll be able to negotiate a settlement rather than to go on strike.
So you've got their back?
I do, yes. Yeah, I totally support them.
Even so, they've only got 2 weeks to make alternative arrangements for their kids on strike day.
I'll probably have to take time off or from work.
The wife will stay home and look after the kids.
I'll most probably take leave.
My children are older, so 16, 14 and 12, so they're just going to stay at home on their own.
Since the news was announced yesterday, RNZ's been flooded with text messages from teachers saying the way the government was presenting the pay offer is misleading. For example, when the Ministry of Education said teachers were being offered an average $10,000 pay increase, teachers pointed out the beginning teacher rate will only increase by about $4,500 over 3 years. Fielding Intermediate's principal Diane Crate says pay parity with high school teachers is a big part of their demands. She says even her own cooking, fabric, wood and metalwork teachers get more money because they're on high school teacher contracts.
Whilst they're working in the same school, teaching the same children, they are on a much better deal. They're getting more money, more release, better conditions.
Analysis by Primary Teachers Union, the NCEA, shows wages have failed to keep pace with rises in the average, median and minimum wages over the past 2 decades. Diane Crate says in the past she'd get plenty of applications for teaching roles, but now she often has to re-advertise the jobs.
We don't want just any old people to be going teaching. We want, in front of all of our children, we want the best possible teachers.
She says teachers are struggling and the chatter in her staff room shows they're prepared to take further action if needed. But the government says its offer and work it's doing to ease workloads and increase teacher numbers is comprehensive and that there's no more money on offer. The Associate Minister of Education, Tracy Martin, says the government wants to work with teachers to make their jobs less stressful.
There's lots of pieces of money that aren't just in this negotiating package that Minister Hipkins and myself and the coalition government are trying very hard to remove the pressures out of the classroom for our teachers.
The parties are likely to head to the Employment Relations Authority for talks. In the meantime, the government and 2 key union allies still at cross purposes, still unable to reach agreement. In Wellington, Carmichael Crop their name.
And you've got a lot to say about the teachers' dispute, pay dispute, as well as NCEA. On the pay dispute, this person says Chris Hipkins is lying when he says teachers are being offered $10,000 increases. I'm being offered $2,000 after many years of even less. Teachers are woefully behind other professional salaries, says this texter. Alistair says, I do not agree with the teachers' stance towards the government. This government has been more than reasonable with its offer, given the political climate it inherited from National. Isn't it a tad strange to wait 9 years before realising their plight and then decide to hammer the government? That from Alistair. And this one from Sue, this is kind of related. We did a story on the essential oils in the Auckland school, Milford School. Sue says the principal of the Auckland school who purchased $2,000 worth of essential oils has lost track of their core business and is not doing the request for more monies for teachers any service at all. A lack of judgment has been shown and he or she should seriously consider their future in the profession, says Sue. It was a she, the principal there, your namesake, Sue, another Sue. Anyway, Auckland kids could travel for free on public transport during weekends and public holidays if a proposal by the Mayor, Phil Goff, and 2 councillors gets the go-ahead. If the council adopts the plan as part of its budget this year, the free travel for under 15-year-olds could be in place by the end of the year. Rowan Quinn was at this afternoon's announcement.
Phil Goff says the move could have the twin effect of helping more families get around the city on weekends and easing congestion on the roads. He says it will come at a cost of $500,000 and there'll be no need to put on more buses and trains.
I think all of us drive around the city and we see half-empty buses in the weekend and near-empty trains. And I think the thought has crossed all of our minds, is there a way that we can increase the usage of these trains and buses that are running on these routes anyway?
Councillor Richard Hill said he had lots of positive feedback from families after one free day of public transport the Friday before Christmas. He says it can be really expensive for those with several children to take public transport.
It really opens up Auckland for parents to take their kids as a family and on the public transport system, because at the moment, probably for most of them, it's cheaper to take the car.
The plan's not a done deal. Councillors have discussed it behind closed doors at workshops, but it will need formal approval as part of the council's annual budget process. Mr Goff is confident all councillors will be on board. He says he would eventually like the policy to go beyond just free weekends, but especially after having to find an extra $500 million for the City Rail link, money is too tight. Councillor Chris Darby says they did look at more extensive public transport fare relief, including helping with school bus fares.
We are not backing away from that. It just requires a bit more work. We're plucking the low-hanging fruit at this stage, and we'll go back to the tree and look at what else is available.
The council has also announced that ferries will be fully integrated into public transport fares by 2020, a year earlier than expected. That'll effectively mean the bus trip to the ferry is included in the ticket price. I Tamaki Makoto mo Checkpoint, ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
It's 18 after 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. The acting Prime Minister says a crash that killed 7 people last year was a terrible tragedy and the government won't be drawn into politicising it. Last week, a coroner's inquest heard the driver in the crash outside the Taranaki town of Waverley in June last year was high on synthetic cannabis. Today, the families of 3 of those killed were at Parliament to meet National leader Simon Bridges and to put their support behind a petition calling for the urgent introduction of roadside saliva testing. Here's political reporter Yvette McCullough.
The families of those who lost loved ones to drug drivers are joining forces to try get politicians to hear their plea. A petition seeking urgent roadside drug testing has been extended by another week in a bid to gather more signatures and increase the pressure on MPs.
This is an accident that simply didn't need to happen.
Logan Porteous lost his parents Ian and Rosalie last year after a car drifted across the centre line near Waverley. On Friday, a coroner's inquest heard confirmation the driver, 28-year-old Jeremy Thompson, was high on synthetic cannabis.
I believe that if the police had the support that they could test drivers on the side of the road, that this could have been prevented. We have seen how quickly laws can be changed, and we just hope that by putting signatures on Matthew's petition, that something can be done in the near future so that this can be stopped from happening again.
Karen Dow brought the petition to Parliament last week in the name of her son Matthew, who died after being struck by a drugged driver high on methamphetamine in 2017. She says she wanted to give people another chance to support it after hearing about the driver in the Waverley crash.
I was devastated to hear the coronial inquest of this family's devastation. I'm hoping, along with the Porteous family and Keane family, that this is brought home to Kiwis. Get behind the petition, get us the numbers. Please, politicians, stand up.
Nationals leader Simon Bridges says his party is fighting alongside these families because urgent action is needed.
Because unlike even just a couple of years ago, we now know the numbers. We know someone's dying every week from drug driving, and we also know that the technology is more than reliable enough to do this. They're doing it in Aussie, they're doing it in the UK, and the time for this now in New Zealand is now.
Acting Prime Minister Winston Peters insists drug driving is an issue the government takes seriously and it will be consulting on it very soon. He says his thoughts are with the families of the Waverley crash.
Well, look, that is just a disastrous circumstance, and we're not going to make politics out of that. We're going to do our utmost to try and eradicate the future potential of that happening over and over again by getting the men and women out there to do the job and by getting the scientific utilities we need to do the job.
And the reliability of the scientific utilities is the main issue. And currently there's no way to test for synthetic cannabinoids or other designer drugs. Logan Porteous says that's not good enough.
Well, try and find a way. At the end of the day, the numbers are climbing very, very quickly, and you've got to find a way to turn that around so that you have less people dying on the roads.
From Parliament for Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
The New Zealand women's sevens team has reached another milestone in their quest for gold at next year's Tokyo Olympics. The reigning world champions beat arch rivals Australia 21-17 in the final of the World Series event in Canada, their 4th title from 5 tournaments this season. Now, the win means New Zealand is automatically qualified for next year's games in Japan and puts them 12 points clear at the top of the standings ahead of the final round in France next month. After this morning's victory, Kiwi captain Sarah Hirini told sports reporter Clay Wilson it was a pleasing result after they finished a disappointing 5th at the World Series event in Japan last month.
Yeah, extremely satisfying. Just really proud of the girls and the way that we've learnt from Japan and then got back on the horse pretty quickly to make sure that we were in a better position this weekend. And I thought they played outstanding, and we obviously had some tough matches, which was great to come out of that on top.
How did you respond to that result in Japan when you went back home and looked over it, and how did you decide to move forward from what had happened in Japan?
Yeah, obviously initially pretty gutted. Every time you wear that black jersey, you don't go out there to lose, and I thought we probably didn't play up to our potential. It was probably the most disappointing thing, but we got back, we reviewed the games, all the girls do, and then our coaches made a great training plan in a couple of weeks leading into this tournament and just made sure that we were getting our little learnings on attack and defence to put us in a better position this weekend.
Today's final looked like a pretty physical and fast affair. What was it like to play in?
Yeah, it was pretty tough. It was Aussie's first final for a long time, so I knew that they were going to come out firing. But our girls are amazing, and when we've got the ball in hand, we're pretty lethal. And just extremely happy with how the girls have gone, and a lot of players are stepping up and definitely owning their positions now.
Obviously, with today's result, you've wrapped up qualification for Tokyo. What does it mean to wrap that sort of thing up so early?
Yeah, that's massive. That was huge for us, and it's quite crazy because we didn't really know that it was happening until after that Spain game. So it was a great moment for our team, and I know that when we get back, we'll be able to celebrate with the rest of the girls and the rest of the coaching staff that have obviously helped us get there as well.
I think with about 7th or better in this next round, you wrap up the title. But I guess how will you guys be approaching that final round in France?
Oh, for us, we are going to go to France and we want to win that tournament as well. We want to make sure that we finish off the season on a high, and probably the way that we started as well. And that's going to be a big focus for us. It will be about going home, recovering, and then making sure that we're in the best shape that we can be come Brits.
Looking forward now, I guess, to Tokyo, because you've qualified, how much better do you think this squad, this team can get?
Oh, I think we can get a hell of a lot better. We've obviously used all 23 girls in our squad, which is amazing. We've got great depth now. Girls have lost games, they've won finals, and they've played in big matches. So when we start getting girls back from injuries and we have all of our team available, I think it's going to be a pretty tough 12 to pick, and it's going to be extremely competitive.
And that was New Zealand women's sevens captain Sarah Hirini speaking to sports reporter Clay Wilson. Now, after months of anticipation, perhaps the most colourful and arguably the world's wackiest singing competition has officially kicked off. Eurovision 2019 is underway in Israel, opening with a parade of performers on the orange carpet, including a competitor from Down Under, Australia's Kate Miller-Heidke. But behind the scenes, authorities are mounting a massive security blitz amid ongoing controversy about Israel's hosting of the event. With all the details, here's the BBC's Barnaby Porter.
Eurovision 2019.
The orange carpet's been rolled out. All manner of outlandish costumes are on view. Kate Miller-Heidke's song Zero Gravity is already floating over the airwaves, ready to face the judges and the fickle verdict of European public opinion.
Zero gravity.
But amid the glitz, the glamour and, it must be said, the cherished cheesiness of this year's event, it's still very much mired in controversy. Overnight, a group of pro-Palestinian activists protested outside Eurovision's opening event in Tel Aviv before being moved away by police.
We're here to protest culture washing, to say no to sparkles and glitter while Palestinians are under occupation.
As host of this year's Eurovision, Israel has tried to use the hugely popular song contest to brand itself as a tolerant and cosmopolitan country, hoping to win increased acceptance on the world stage. Israel's public broadcaster Khan has even posted a controversial video online, with the singers welcoming tourists to Tel Aviv airport as they send up stereotypes about Israel.
I know just what you heard, that it's a land of war and occupation.
But we have so much more than that. You'll see the prices, you'll say, what? We like to call ourselves the startup nation.
But Israel's best efforts haven't been able to stop a global movement calling on performers to pull out of the contest. Dozens of European artists have signed a letter calling for the contest to be moved elsewhere. Kate Miller-Heidke has admitted she did some soul-searching herself.
I thought deeply about the decision to come here, and I stand by that decision now. I think Eurovision was created with a spirit of togetherness, the spirit of breaking down barriers between people and using the power of music and art to come together and be open. I'm glad I'm here.
Security, meanwhile, is paramount. Police spokesman Mickey Rosenfeld has been briefing the media on the extensive preparations on land and off the coast of Tel Aviv.
We are patrolling the area from the Jaffa port all the way down the coast where the Eurovision Song Contest is taking place, making sure that there's enough security on the ground for the thousands of tourists that are taking part and are in the area of the Eurovision, which is continuing throughout the week. And we have over 8,000 police officers on the ground involved in security measures.
And certainly if these tourists from the UK are anything to go by, the security blanket is comforting.
We felt safe the whole time here. We were out walking last night on the beach at night. It felt really safe. We've been okay being out on our own. And we've seen some police around, but there isn't really sort of a heavy security, so we haven't felt nervous at all.
Yeah. And the Eurovision Song Contest is about peace and love, so we're here for that.
Eurovision fans, they're ending that report from Barnaby Porter, and that grand final of Eurovision 2019, and I'm sure you want to know when it is, it will take place on Sunday, New Zealand time. Just enough time for a bit of your feedback. How about this huge pay rise is linked to reducing illiteracy rates in school leavers? No improvement, no wage increase, says this person. 1 out of every 5 pupils is not learning reading or basic maths. How they can ignore these kids for 10 years shocks me. That from Winsome. And Kate and her son, who are in Karori, say that I can't see how returning the focus to external exams is in any way going to help with stress. We're disappointed, says Kate and her son. And she says it seems like a return to the bad old days. But my favourite text of the day is the person who has simply written in to say, hate you. Well, we dedicate the show to you this evening because we love that you are listening to us. Have a superb night.
Headlines at 6:30. The government says there's no way it can meet teachers' pay demands, but changes announced today to the NCEA should greatly reduce their workload. More money has been distributed to victims of the Christchurch attack, including people who were at the mosques during the shootings but were uninjured. And the Royal Commission into the mosque shootings began its work today. A survey suggests 4% of the population are the victims of half of all crime in the country. And the Auckland Council is to consider making public transport free for under 15s on weekends and public holidays. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather will be at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
These are part of a formation which is between 1 and 11 million years. I was pretty astonished. It was pretty mind-blowing jumping in that creek.
Lately is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
That's